The next time you think of winter survival, you probably picture soldiers bundled in sleeping bags, wrapped in wool blankets, or huddled around fires. But during the harshest campaigns of World War II, many soldiers had none of those luxuries. They were dropped into snow-covered forests, mountain passes, and open fields with only what they could carry. Yet, instead of freezing, they relied on a trick that required no sleeping bag at all, one that still works today for campers, bushcrafters, and anyone who wants to master the raw art of survival. Before you click away, let's dive right into how this little-known soldier's method kept thousands alive in brutal conditions where the cold could kill faster than bullets. Soldiers had to sleep without gear in freezing conditions. During World War II, particularly in the European and Eastern fronts, troops often faced temperatures dropping well below freezing. Supply lines broke down. Winter gear never arrived. A sleeping bag, if issued at all, was bulky and often abandoned when soldiers had to march long distances. In the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, frostbite was as much an enemy as German artillery. So soldiers turned to fieldcraft and improvised methods passed down from older campaigns. One of the most effective was the ground bed trick, a method of insulating the body from below, which matters more than piling layers on top. The principle is simple but critical. The ground steals heat faster than the air. A soldier lying directly on snow or frozen soil would be shivering within minutes, no matter how many coats he wore. By building up a thick barrier between himself and the ground, using whatever materials were nearby, branches, evergreen boughs, hay, straw, or even clothing he wasn't wearing, he could trap enough dead air space beneath his body to keep warm through the night. The ground bed trick saved soldiers in winter campaigns. Instead of carrying sleeping bags, soldiers built makeshift beds from local material. They stacked pine branches in layers, each crisscrossing to prevent gaps, until they had 6 to 8 inches of springy insulation. Over this, they might add straw, leaves, or even spare uniforms. When soldiers camped in groups, they sometimes worked together to build large ground platforms, turning the forest floor into a mattress thick enough to block the deadly pool of frozen soil. You know, this technique was actually quite common among Finnish troops during the Winter War against the Soviet Union. Lacking proper tents, Finnish soldiers would construct ground beds lined with spruce boughs, cover themselves with their greatcoats, and somehow outlast nights at, well, minus 30 degrees Celsius. Later on, German soldiers adopted rather similar methods during Operation Barbarossa, when their standard-issue blankets just proved utterly useless against the Russian winter. Sleeping bags, especially the canvas and down-filled ones from the 1940s, were awfully bulky, prone to soaking up moisture, and honestly pretty ineffective if the soldier had sweated during the day. Wet fabric would freeze solid overnight, making things even worse. The ground bed trick, on the other hand, relied on layering materials that could be refreshed every day. If the branches got damp, new ones could simply be cut. If straw was available, it could be spread and replaced quite easily. It was lighter on the march too, because soldiers only carried their coats and uniforms. The insulation came straight from the landscape itself. For modern survivalists, this method still holds a bit of an edge. A store-bought sleeping bag can cost hundreds of dollars, but a proper ground bed can be built in under an hour with, well, no gear at all. The soldier's trick was never about comfort, it was all about efficiency. It focused on the single biggest threat, conduction from the earth, and solved it with absolutely zero equipment. To recreate this soldier's cold weather trick today, the steps are straightforward. First, never lie directly on the ground in freezing conditions. Instead, start by clearing snow down to bare soil, if possible. Then lay down a base of branches, logs, or even bark to act as the foundation. Over that, stack evergreen boughs or dry grass in alternating directions, building up thickness until the bed feels springy and elevated. Ideally, your insulation should be at least as deep as the length of your hand. Next, use your outer clothing or a poncho as a cover and keep your core layers dry at all costs. If you are with a group, build beds close together. Soldiers discovered that body heat pooled in clusters, dramatically reducing the risk of hypothermia. Even in a backyard or controlled camping trip, testing this technique can prove just how effective it remains. This soldier's method also works in non-winter scenarios. In damp or swampy conditions, a raised bed of branches keeps you above moisture, reducing the risk of trench foot and illness. In desert survival, the same layering can shield you from contact with scorching sand that drains body fluids overnight. The beauty of this WWII trick is its adaptability. It was a product of necessity, but its principles are universal. For history buffs, understanding how soldiers survived without modern equipment gives a deeper appreciation for their resilience. These weren't just men with rifles. They were problem solvers who turned the environment into their ally. For survivalists, these lessons remain directly useful. Gear can be lost, bags can rip, and tents can fail. Knowledge, however, weighs nothing. The soldier's ground bed trick is proof that survival is less about equipment and more about adapting timeless principles. Heat always moves from warm to cold, so insulate beneath yourself. Moisture robs warmth faster than wind, so keep clothing dry. A group shares heat better than an individual. These truths haven't changed since the forests of Europe froze under snow. So, the next time someone tells you a sleeping bag is the only answer to cold weather, remember the World War II soldiers who endured winters with nothing but coats, boughs and grit. Their trick of insulating from the ground up is as relevant now as it was then. Whether you're a camper, prepper, or just fascinated by history, this method offers both practical survival value and a glimpse into the hardships of the past. If this guide gave you useful insight into soldier survival and wartime resilience, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning for more deep dives into history's forgotten skills. Share this with fellow enthusiasts who value real knowledge over gimmicks and keep the tradition of practical, hard-earned wisdom alive.